Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Ramana. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtottara to the Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtottara to the Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavini ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Just to let you know, part of the assembled devotees is a camera there taking us out on the internet. So there may be as many as 20 all over the North America. They write me sometimes. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 27th day of May, 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we were beginning chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme, on page 345. Arjuna Uvacha Kim Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam Kim Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama. You got it? Page 345? 345. Kim Karma Purushottama Haribhutam Chakim Proktam Adibhutam Tikim Proktam Aridaivam Kimuchyate Aridaivam Kimuchyate Arjuna Vacha King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam Aridaivam Kimuchyate. Arjuna Uvacha King Tad Brahma Kimadhyatmam King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Arjuna Uvacha King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Arjuna Uvacha King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Page 345. Okay, go ahead, Prabhu. You want to try it? You want to try it?
You can try. King Tad Brahmam Kimadhyatmam
King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam
King Karma Purushottama
King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam
Adhidevyam Kimuchyate.
Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Go ahead. Arjuna Uvacha King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Did you want to try?
Yeah.
Go ahead. King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam King Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Chakim Proktam Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Anyone online?
Arjuna Uvacha
Arjuna Uvacha
Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam
King Tad Brahma Kamadhyatmam
Kim Karma Purushottama
King Karma Purushottama
Adibhutam Chakim Proktam
Adibhutam Chakim Proktam
Adidaivam Kimuchyate.
Adidaivam Kimuchyate. Okay, I'll read the word by words myself. You just read along silently. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjun said, Kim what? Tat that. Brahma, Brahman. Kim what? Adhyatmam, the self. Kim what? Karma, fruit of activities. Purusha Uttama, O Supreme Person. Adibhutam, the material manifestation, cha, and kim, what? Proktam is called. Adidaivam, the demigods, kim, what? Uchate is called. Translation. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the Self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Purport. In this chapter, Lord Krishna answers different questions from Arjuna, beginning with what is Brahman. The Lord also explains karma, fruitive activities, devotional service, and yoga principles, and devotional service in its pure form. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the Supreme Absolute Truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In addition, the living entity, the individual soul, is also called Brahman. Arjuna also inquires about Atma, which refers to body, soul, and mind. According to the Vedic dictionary, Atma refers to the mind, soul, body, and senses also. Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottama, Supreme Person, which means that he was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be the Supreme Authority, able to give definitive answers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, this verse spoken by Arjuna, which is questioning Krishna about various items, hails back to the end of the previous chapter. In text 29 and 30, Krishna lists these things. Beginning with Jara Marana Mokshaya Mama Shritti Yatanti Ye, those who take shelter of me, desiring liberation from old age and death. Te Brahma Tadvidu Kritsnab Adhyatmam Karma Chakalam. Notice those are the same thing. What is Brahman, right? And what is Adhyatman, the self, and what is karma, what is the fruit of activity. And the last verse continues with these items that Arjuna mentions in the first verse of the next chapter. Sadibhuta Adidaivama, what is the Adibhuta, what is Adidaiva? Sa Adiyagyam, the principle of yagya, and Tevidu. And Prayanakale Pichamam Tevidu Yukta Chetasa. How can one know you at the time of death, you see? That's also part of Arjuna's question, which he'll continue in the next verse, exactly quoting the same words practically, prayanakale chikatam. So it's interesting that these two chapters mesh so beautifully like this, and one leads to another. And now in the third and fourth verses, and the fifth, sixth, seventh verses, Krishna will answer the questions of Arjuna. So, let's see what Arjuna continues with his questions. Text 2. Adiyagya katam kotra. All right, let's try that again. Adiyagya katam kotra. Dehesmin madhusudana. Priyanakale chakatam. Geyosi niyatatmabihi. Arjuna continued, who is the Lord of sacrifice, and how does he live in the body, O Madhusudan? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Purport. Lord of sacrifice may refer to either Indra or Vishnu. Vishnu is the chief of the primal demigods, including Brahma and Shiva, and Indra is the chief of the administrative demigods. Both Indra and Vishnu are worshipped by yagya performances. But here Arjuna asks who is actually the Lord of yagya, sacrifice, and how the Lord is residing within the body of the living entity. Arjuna addresses the Lord as Madhusudana because Krishna once killed a demon named Madhu. Actually, these questions, which are of the nature of doubts, should not have arisen in the mind of Arjuna, because Arjuna is a Krishna-conscious devotee. Therefore, these doubts are like demons. Since Krishna is so expert in killing demons, Arjuna here addresses him as Madhusudana so that Krishna might kill the demoniac doubts that have arisen in Arjuna's mind. Now, The word priyana kale in this verse is very significant, because whatever we do in life will be tested at the time of death. Priyana kale means the time of death. Arjuna is very anxious to know of those who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness. What should be their position at that final moment? At the time of death, all the bodily functions are disrupted and the mind is not in a proper condition. Thus, disturbed by the bodily situation, one may not be able to remember the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Kulashekar, a great devotee, prays, "My dear Lord, just now I am quite healthy, and it is better that I die immediately, so that the swan of my mind can seek entrance at the stem of your lotus feet." The metaphor is used because the swan, a bird of the water, takes pleasure in digging into the lotus flowers. Its sporting proclivity is to enter the lotus flower. So Maharaj Kulashekar says to the Lord, "Now my mind is undisturbed and I am quite healthy. If I die immediately thinking of your lotus feet, then I am sure that my performance of your devotional service will become perfect. But if I have to wait for my natural death, then I do not know what will happen, because at that time the bodily functions will be disrupted, my throat will be choked up, and I do not know whether I shall be able to chant your name. Better let me die immediately." Close quote. Arjuna questions how a person can fix his mind on Krishna's lotus feet at such a time. So, this continues with the questions. Adi Yajna, who is the Lord of sacrifice? How does he live in the body? And O Madhusudan, how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Now this is really the most important question, because everything leads up to that. The understanding these subordinate subject matters, what is sacrifice, who is the Lord of sacrifice, and how all these other questions that are come up in the Bhagavad Gita really support this final understanding. How can we develop our consciousness so that at the time of death we can think of Krishna and not come back, and go back to him? This is the theme of the Bhagavad Gita again and again. So after this, Krishna will now answer those questions systematically. and when we get to text 5, 6, and 7, these provide a little lesson in remembering Krishna at the time of death and the importance of that. And you'll see text 7 gives a formula for how we can develop our lives and always remember Krishna and always be ready for that time. We don't know when it will come. It can come anytime. All right, so let's go on to 3. Krishna begins to answer the questions. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Dhyatma Muchyate Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Sangitaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "The indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the Self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruit of activities." Purport. Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Para-Brahman. Brahman refers to the living entity, and Para-Brahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. Excuse me. In material consciousness, his nature is to be the Lord of matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In the Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Para-Brahman. The living entity, or Jivatma, takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter, and sometimes he identifies himself with a superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy, according to his identification with material or spiritual matter. Material or spiritual nature. He receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8,400,000 species of life. But in the spiritual nature, he has only one body. In the material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices or yajna. But when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. The Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived of as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man and woman, and the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rain, grains, and semen. So just to let you know, we're going through the Bhagavad Gita, and we're checking all the revisions that have been made. And that paragraph is going to be removed or maybe edited because it's not so clear. Can anyone tell me what the enjoyer on the moon is? I don't know what it is. So it's kind of mysterious. So anyway, that's just to let you know. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by a man and formed into semen, which impregnates a woman. And thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice and to repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. The impersonalist commentators on the Bhagavad Gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world, and to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Bhagavad Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord, Achyuta, never falls down. That's what Achyuta means, never fall, one who never falls. And in Prabhupada's vocabulary, that means that he's infallible. He would always use that word, meaning cannot fall. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes the form of Jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Para-Brahman, the Supreme Lord. Okay, so there's a lot of substance here that we'll go through. So Krishna is beginning to answer these questions. Aksharam Brahma Paramam. The spirit, we share this nature with Krishna. And we're purely spiritual in our original form. But because we're infinitesimal and Krishna is infinite, we are in a marginal position, which means that we can become fascinated by the dualities of this material world, material energy, turn away from Krishna, and then get entangled in the material energy. This is how we got here. We're all exiles here. We're all kind of aliens. We don't belong here. Our nature is purely spiritual. We belong back in the spiritual world. So there's a nice verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that I quote often, which describes this process. And it begins with the word bhayam. Because in the material world, that fear is always like right behind us. There always might be a fearful thing happening. Some disease, some war, some attack, some insult, something online, you know. There's all kinds of things that threaten us, and we know that. Just now, there's these incredible weather things going on. You've heard of the tornadoes, you know. Then we had the big rain and the fires, you know. It's going to be fire season soon. So the nature of this world is anxiety. We want to go to the world without anxiety. And what is that world called? Without anxiety? Yeah, but there's a specific word that means free of anxiety. Vaikunta. Yes, Kunda is anxiety, you know, the place where there's no anxiety. So and the highest Vaikuntha planet is Goloka. That's also certainly Vaikuntha. So first Krishna defines Brahman. That was the question. Svabhavo Dhyatma Muchade, and his nature is the self. So Krishna is supreme Brahman. He's the supreme self, the super self. We are individual Brahman, and we're Jivatma. And then the definition of karma, which is very interesting. That activity which brings you another body is known as karma. That's what he says here. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruit of activities. So really, this karmic activity, which is the nature of being in the material world, one way or another we're trying to do something to give us more safety, more happiness, earn something fruitive. We're trying to enjoy that fruit. That is an essential part of our conditioning here that keeps us bound here. Because really what we're meant to be doing is acting with our spiritual senses for the pleasure of Krishna. And that is the most pleasing thing, because we're part and parcel of Krishna. In the Vedanta Sutra, there's many illuminating sutras, but this one is very interesting. They're all, to me, in this context. Anandamaya Abhyasat. They're all little aphorisms. So that means that the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always full of bliss. How can we tell? By his pastimes, by his activities. Anandamayo Abhyasat. Abhyasa means practice or activity. So now we, being part and parcel of Krishna, belong in that position, that we should always be full of bliss. But we're not like that now. We're getting little dollops of material happiness, and then it goes. The problem with material pleasure or happiness is that it's temporary and limited, and it often has a deleterious effect. And sense gratification, gives us some pleasure, but if you overdo it, then you can get in a whole world of pain. Let's just put it that way, right? So this material world is not meant for our enjoyment. It's actually, Krishna describes it very concisely. Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. The word alaya means an abode of suffering. And not only that, but it's temporary. Any position you get, okay, I can tolerate it here, there's some ups and downs, but no. It's going to change so that it's just all pain. Because it's temporary. So, and Krishna says in the 10th chapter, Mrityu sarvaharashchaham. As death, I take everything away. We spend our lives trying to, we have accumulation, whether it's relatives or a position or physical, money, whatever it may be. But all of that which we have accumulated, we're attached to, is taken away from us because we're taken away from the body. If you have a bank account, there's a name on it. That's not your name. That's the name of your body. And when your body goes, you go from the money and you become penniless. Very shocking. Unless you voluntarily become penniless and give it all to Krishna. Ishavashamidam sarvam. Then it serves as a means of serving the Lord. And that's why yajna is so important. We learned in the 3rd chapter, this key verse, Yagyartar kamano nyatra loko yam karma bandhanaha. This is the first line, is so telling. And we did a little edit on it, and I always like to share that because it's so illuminating. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work causes bondage in this material world. Now we have a little problem there. I'm an editor. I've been doing it for 51 years, working on Prabhupada's books. And it's very important to have the subject and the predicate in the proper order. Because this is work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. All right. I'm the head of a very pious family of devotees. And on Saturday, we all come to the temple and we do service. I'm in the temple room with my 11-year-old son, and we're cleaning, we're straightening things up, and we're doing service, and there's the deity, maybe the curtains may be open, so we're very blissful. And outside, in the kitchen, my wife is there with my 13-year-old daughter, and they're helping to prepare the Rajbhog, doing some cut-up and things like that. Oh, this is great. So we're performing the sacrifice for Vishnu. Has to be performed. We're performing sacrifice for Vishnu. You see? Then whatever else we do, then otherwise work, and we do other kinds of work, will bind us. So that means that whatever we do outside that's binding us, what we're doing in the temporal is liberating us. So we're in good shape. That's not what the verse means. The verse doesn't mean work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. The verse says work has to be performed as a sacrifice for Vishnu. You see the difference? All your work has to be performed as that. Otherwise, whatever you do that isn't binds you. You see? You see the difference? If you start out with work done as a sacrifice has to be performed, it means that, well, I'll do some work as a sacrifice of Vishnu. No, your work is the subject. Work, whatever you do, has to be done as a sacrifice. That's the actual meaning of it. So how to arrange one's life that way? We have to get guidance from the scripture, guidance from the realized soul, and we're getting both here. The scripture is here with Krishna speaking, and Prabhupada has given us his association as instructions explaining it. That's why the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Otherwise, if the Bhagavad Gita is explained by a non-devotee, then it's distorted. It's not as it is. Because only the real devotees can understand Krishna. Prabhupada would always quote that verse in the 18th chapter. How can we know God? God says, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yabanjastasmi tattvataha. One can know me in truth, tattvataha, very important word, only by bhakti. Because then only does he agree to reveal himself. We can't find anything out about any even powerful human being here unless they show us some favor and reveal it. What to speak of God, you see? So bhakti is the only way to really understand Krishna and get his mercy and benefit from that knowledge. So I just wanted to go through some of those things. So Krishna is answering here, what is the Atma? Action pertaining to development of material bodies is a living entity is called karma, or fruit of activities. So we want to work in such a way that we're completely akarmic. Not that we want to do good karma, because if we do pious work, then we'll have to reap that in the next life. We'll still have a body. It may be a better body, we may be even on a heavenly planet. But that body will end. That's what the material means, it's temporary. And even though it's good karma, it's not really good because it keeps you wrapped up in it. So we want to attain the platform of Naishkarmya, so that whatever we do has no karmic result at all. What's the result? Purification. So that we become pure enough so that when we finally leave this body, we don't want anything in this material world. We just want to serve Krishna. And that's take it to the spiritual world. So that platform of how to act, and this idea of going to heaven, Krishna in the next chapter will have a little lesson about that, where he says, Kamais taista rita jnana papadyante anya devata tangtam nivamastaya prakatyaniya taksvaya. Those whose intelligence is stolen by material desires, they worship all kinds of demigods, you see. And if you want to worship the demigod, you say, a certain demigod, I'll make your faith strong for that, and you'll be able to worship the demigods, you may even get some fruit. But whatever you get, even if it's going to the Indraloka or whatever, it's temporary. So Krishna says, the final, Antavatu palam tesham tadbhavalti alpamedasham devan devi ajoyanti madbhakta yanti mamipi. Actually, I think that was in the last chapter. I made a mistake about that. So that fruit that you get from worshiping the gods is temporary, antavatu palam tesham. And it's only desired by those who are alpamedasham, not too intelligent. You see? It means a small amount of brain substance. Devan, you worship the devas, you go to the devas. You worship me, you come to me. This is the key thing. And if you come to Krishna, you don't have to come back. If you worship the devas, you may go up to Indraloka, live for millions of years, but you will have to come back to this world of death. Martya lokam, he says, Vishanti. So the 7th chapter and the 9th chapter has very strong words, how it's not a good investment of our time and our faith. But if we worship Krishna, then even if we don't go back to God in this life, that is not lost. And Krishna doesn't take that away. Our bhakti credits when we lose this body. We simply get born in a family so we can continue. And then maybe 1 or 2 births later, we actually can go back to Godhead. Whereas if you don't do the material karmas just right, you may get the opposite result. Like there's a pastime in the Bhagavatam where it's kind of complicated. The demigods lost their kingdom to the demons. And so they prayed to Krishna, what can you do? Please help us, you know. So he advised them to go. Actually, what happened is that Indra offended Brihaspati, their spiritual master, by not getting off his throne when he came into the room. So Brihaspati turned on his heel, walked out, and they couldn't find him. So now we've offended our guru, so they felt weakened. And the demigods took advantage, and they took over the heavenly kingdom. You see? So the demigods, they needed another guru, and so they were advised, I forget if Krishna advised them, to go ask Twashta, to ask his son, Vishwarup, to be the guru for them, to be the advisor, so that they would have someone like that. And he agreed. There was some connection with also the asuras, you know. So he would sometimes offer some oblation to the asuras. Indra was hiding behind a post. He saw that and he became infuriated. This is Indra. He always loses it, you know. Then he feels sorry. So this particular gentleman had 3 heads, and he was worshiping, and Indra cut off his heads. So he offends his one guru and he kills the other one. So now what's going to happen? So Twashta was enraged. His son, he asked him to do the service. He did the service. Now he's dead. So Twashta said, all right, I'm going to perform a sacrifice, and I'll invoke a demon that'll kill Indra. But he was so disturbed that he said one word backwards. The Sanskrit, is very precise. And instead of getting a demon who would kill Indra, he got a demon who would be killed by Indra. And so that was Vishwarup. But Vishwarup was actually a great devotee named Chitraketu, who was reborn as that demon. He was cursed, and he accepted it. He was killed by Indra, sent back to Godhead, and then Indra had to suffer thousands of years because he killed a Brahmin, because he was invoked by the son of Twashta, and it was a whole complicated. And that all grew out of of Twashta being so disturbed that he mispronounced a word. But in Krishna consciousness, even if you pronounce the word Krishna, some people can have trouble saying the Maha Mantra. Krishna still accepts. He accepts the mood. There's a verse, I always forget the first 3 lines, but the last line is very famous. Bhava Grahi Janardana. Bhava Grahi Janardana. It describes how the ignorant person who's still pious, he will say, address Vishnu as Vishnaya, when actually it should be Vishnave. And the Brahman, he will say Vishnave, he knows the thing. But Vishnu, he accepts both, because they're done sincerely. Even if you mispronounce a little bit, you see? Says, okay, the heart's in the right. He's looking for the love, not the precise pronunciation. So anyway, that's what we need in this age, because who's going to really be qualified to do all this stuff? But we can become qualified to please Krishna by the simple process of bhakti yoga. Chanting, and it's not the great sacrifice you came here, and you're attending Bhagavad Gita class, but this is pleasing to Krishna. Don't think he can't hear. He's hearing. I hope he doesn't get too displeased for all my mistakes. But here you are sitting, listening to his words and the words of his pure devotee, and I'm doing my best to explain. And so, what was the big sacrifice? A little time, You don't have to know all the Sanskrit. Some of you didn't pronounce. My friend here, he never chanted the verse. He knows them all, but he doesn't get. But it doesn't matter. He's sincere. So Krishna is looking for our sincere attempt to serve him, and then everything will be auspicious. Okay, so should I go on to the next verse? We're starting this three verse lesson that culminates in text 7, which is sometimes I used to, in the Sunday feast, I may do it again, just speak on these 3 verses, 5, 6, and 7, which features in the purports the Hare Kṛṣṇa mantra. Text 5, because one of the questions was, how can one know you at the time of death? Remember? Prayana Kale. Antakale means the time of death, the end time. Antakale cha mameva smodan mukba kalevadam yak priyati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sangshayaha. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Purport. In this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the purest of the pure. Therefore, anyone who is constantly Krishna conscious is also the purest of the pure. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly, chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. Torah api sahishnuna. I think that this has been fixed to be, because what he says here is that one should be more tolerant than a tree. Torah api sahishnuna. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. So that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. So this is actually what the whole thing points to. If we become saturated with Krishna consciousness, and we mold our life in such a way that we are arranging it so that we're reminded of Krishna all the time, because we're actually serving him as far as possible, then we have a good chance of remembering Krishna at the time of death. Now, sometimes death comes unexpectedly, so therefore we should try to be Krishna conscious all the time. But even if it comes normally, like we have a illness or whatever, we can arrange, and we had so many experiences here. People over the years, they asked me to come and chant Hare Kṛṣṇa when they leave their body in the hospital. They say, well, we're planning to do it. They'll actually, say, okay, we're going to pull the plug. I know we're going to, and that happens. And it's sometimes you can see it's very auspicious, because I happened to have worked in a hospital for a whole year before I joined Krishna consciousness. This is 1971, 72. I worked as an inhalation therapist, which means the ones who take the bags of oxygen, so I saw a lot of people die. And practically all of them are scared and disturbed. Really what they are is sedated, because there's so much disturbance beforehand, and the nurses keep them, quiet and relaxed and as far as possible. But it's a terrifying experience. You don't know. If you haven't practiced Krishna consciousness, you don't know. And there's something called terminal restlessness that they have in the hospitals, which is when the Yamadutas and people complain, what are those dogs, that are attacking? And the nurses think, they're hallucinating, terminal restlessness, so they shoot them up, put them asleep. No, this is the beginning of an inauspicious leaving. It's described in the Bhagavatam, that what happens. And so I had some experience with that. And I also had experience with devotees leaving their body, and it's much more peaceful. First of all, they want to be fully conscious. They don't want any sedatives, so they'll have full consciousness. It may be painful, but it's temporary. And then kirtan going on, a room full of devotees. It could be in a hospital or at home, whatever, and chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. This is Prabhupada's model. He taught us. I wasn't there, but it's very famous. The devotees were filling the room in Vrindavan. They were chanting, for a long time. Prabhupada, left. And so, and we had several devotees in the last few years of COVID. One didn't, actually neither of them died of COVID. They both died of cancer, but they died in a very calm, because they had practiced Krishna consciousness. They were thinking of Krishna, and devotees were there reading and chanting, like that. So this is the benefit of the association of devotees. That's why Prabhupada had a society of devotees, that they can, at that final time, you can be in a position where you can be reminded of Krishna and remember Krishna, because that's the main thing, is to remember Krishna. Okay, and then text 6 gives us the general principle Everybody thinks of something at that time, and that's what determines your next life. Yang yang vapi smaran bhavam tyajachante kalevaram tam tame vaiti kaunteya sadatan bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Purport. The process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. A person who at the end of his life quits his body thinking of Krishna attains the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. But it is not true that a person who thinks of something other than Krishna attains the same transcendental state. That is a point we should note very carefully. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaj Bharat, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the end of his life, and so in his next life he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer he remembered his past activities, he had to accept that animal body. Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. Therefore, the chanting of Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare, is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. So, we'll stop there with the Bhagavad Gita, but I wanted to share a few verses with you, because it's such a treasure, really, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. These books not only instruct us why and how we should be Krishna conscious, but they give us subject matter to remember, like the Bhagavatam. It's filled with so much description of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, of course, and outside of Vrindavan. So there's some verses and our acharyas have written other books that help us remember. For instance, the Kṛṣṇa Karnamrita. I was just reading about the glories of the Kṛṣṇa Karnamrita. Lord Chaitanya was completely taken by the beauty of that book when he went to South India, and he had it copied and brought it back to Puri, and it was then became an essential part of what he was doing with the bhajan and everything. And so one of the, let's see, I think, yeah, there's two verses that I put into poetry there. There's 112. I should do them all, but that's I have to dedicate some time every day for that. So one is a classic verse. It's quoted, I think, twice in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's just describing Krishna. How Bilamangal was perceiving him. His physical eyes were gone, but he could see through his spiritual eyes. Maduram maduram vaparasya vibho maduram maduram vadanam maduram. Madhugandhi madhu smitameta daho maduram 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 maduram. You know this verse. Very nice. But you don't know the poem. Sweet, sweet is my dear Lord's form. Sweet is still his face so fair. But his honey-scented gentle smile is sweet beyond compare. Did you hear that before? You knew that poem too?
I knew that it's our language, like a Bengali, we know that.
Well,
Maduram.
yeah, that's the Sanskrit. But the English poem, anyway, if you're interested. So then there's another one near the end, which is not so famous. Let's see if I can remember it now. Yes. Jaya 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 David David, no. Yeah. Jaya 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 Deva 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 Chubhavana Mangala Divya Nama Deha Jaya 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 Deva Krishna Deva Shavana Mano Nayanamrita Avatara. That's also the Karnamrita. I think verse 110 is right near the end. Oh glory, 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 Lord, oh glory unto Thee, who with Thy holy name bless all three worlds and set them free. Oh glory, glory, glory unto Thee, O Krishna Dev, whose nectar floods our ears and eyes and hearts in endless waves. So these are the gifts of our great acharyas, giving us subject matter. And there's a verse in the Pajabali which glorifies the glorification of Krishna constantly. This is a really beautiful verse. Aho ahobir nakale viduyate sudasudhara modaram pade pade dine dine chandana chandra shitalam yasho yashoratana yasagiyate. Now those who are a little bit aware of what goes on in the temple and the deity, they know that chandan especially is cooling in the summer heat. And to make it even more cooling, we sprinkle this camphor inside, special camphor powder, right? So that's important to understand for this verse. And the Kali Yuga is like a blazing fire. There's so much danger and it's so disturbing. So with those two things in mind, it says, because at every step they drink a flood of wondrous nectar sweet, whose cooling power sandal paste enhanced with camphor can't defeat. They feel as if the raging blaze of Kali's days had ne'er begun. How blessed are they who fill their days with praise of Shri Yashoda's son. So that's what Srila Prabhupada did. If you study his life that we knew after he came to America, and of course you learned about before America, he was either typing, translating, writing, meeting with others, speaking about Krishna, leading kirtan, inducing his students to write the Back to Godhead magazine, which I worked on, like that. He was constantly glorifying the Lord, constantly glorifying Krishna. And so his days were blissful from morning to night. He wasn't disturbed by all the disturbing elements. He goes to New York City. I lived in New York City for a while. By nature, it's a place that keeps you on edge. The noise, the dirt, the danger of being on the street. There's so many things. Prabhupada just took it all in stride. He's wandering up Broadway, in Times Square, the Bowery, which is the place where all the... Now we have, homeless people here. In those days, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, if you got homeless and you fell out of luck in Duluth, Iowa, you traveled to New York and you became a member of the Bowery. It was like the place where everyone east of the Mississippi went if they got homeless, So it was not the best place, but that Prabhupada was living there, holding programs. And then he went uptown a couple of blocks, got out of the Bowery, Lower East Side. So the point is that this is the way in which you can actually be happy in this world, by not trying to enjoy it, but simply taking whatever is given and what you can employ and using it for glorifying Krishna, and just floating along in that glorification, which is pure nectar. And these books that we have, the prayers of the gopis and in the 10th canto itself is a wonderful meditation. And the Sanskrit language is so wonderful. But I'll give you another couple of prayers, and then we have to... this is an excerpt from Rupa Goswami's first Kunja Viharashtaka, the Krishna. So it goes like this. And here's the beat. We can play the drum, but I won't bother, it's too heavy. Inna nila manimandulavarna pullani pukusamanchatakarna Krishna labhada kishora sihari sundaro jayati kunja bihari sarvatak patadakaulakapava dvangsanena ritabasa bhagarva goshta rakshana kate gididhari leelaya jayati kunja bihari, which means his smooth complexion conquers sapphires, stunning to the eye. Kadamba blooms with fragrance full on each ear gently lie. His beauty's greatened by his chest, where Gunja necklace stays. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. When Indra's sacrifice he stopped, he stole the Deva's pride by playfully uplifting Giri Govardhan to hide his friends and cows beneath the hill. For 7 nights and days, all glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. So there's 8 verses there. If you write me, I'll send you all my poetry. The key to remember is Dravida, like South India, 108. Dravida108 at Gmail. And then I'll send you my PDF of poetry, which you may enjoy. Dravida 108. Yeah. Okay. At Gmail. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Hare Hare Bol. We have to get ready for the Artik, which is coming at 8:15. And we'll see the beautiful Radha Giridhari. All right. And tomorrow we'll study the text 7, which is the culmination of this 3-verse lesson that I mentioned. Are you living here in San Diego? Just visiting?
San Diego, we live in.
Oh, good, good. This class is also broadcast on the YouTube if you can't make it, Zoom.